Hello, hope you're doing great. This is Mariapandi Rajan, your friendly software engineer. And in this video, we're going to talk about functions in C++. So today we are going to directly dive into code because functions make more sense when you actually look at them in code, right? So let's just look at how we can create functions and how they are useful, in creating these reusable blocks of code, right? So here, let's just create an instruction to add two numbers. Like how will you do that? To add two numbers, you need two variables, right? So let's just create them. We'll create an integer variable called first number, and we'll initialize it to 0, and we'll have another integer called second number initialized to 0. And if you want to add them, you will just say result is equal to first number plus second number, right? So this is the actual logic, and then maybe we need another variable for the result, right? So to store the result, so we just store it in this. Yeah, so then maybe we'll want to print it out, right? So we just say cout um, you know the answer is, we can just say result, right? stdendl. So this is cool and all, but here first of all the numbers are all zero, so we need some way of getting those inputs from the user, right? So let's say maybe we're making use of the stdcin, right? So let's just say stdcin, and we'll get the first number. We'll just say, we'll first ask the user to input the first number, right? So we'll just say stdcout, enter first number, yeah, and we'll get their input inside the variable first number, yeah, and then we'll just do the same for the second number as well. Enter second number, right? So we'll store it here. Yeah, so yes, now we have a program, right? So basically, like, we have these three variables. We have first number, second number, and result. All we have initialized to 0, and then we are getting the inputs from the user for the first number and the second number, and then basically we are just adding those two numbers and printing out the result. So that's pretty much what this program does. So let's just run this and see, right? So see our application in action. So yeah, so as expected, so it's asking for the first number, so we just give it maybe 10, and then the second number, let's say 50, right? So yeah, so it's adding those two numbers and giving us the result. So yes, just as we expected. Now the thing is, let's say we want to you know keep doing this for, let's say, 3 times. Like, we want the user to enter for some reason. Like, I'm just taking hypothetical, for some strange reason. Let's say our application enables the user to add two numbers 3 times. All right, so how would you modify this code to do the same functionality more than once? Like, in our case, we want to do this 3 times. How will you do that? Now, one obvious way would be just to copy and paste this another 2 times, right? So if you just do that, it'll just we'll have that functionality. So this is basically, we'll then put like a small comment here saying functionality to add two numbers, right? So this is that functionality that we have. So it starts here till here, right? So this is the set of instructions that will accept two inputs from the user and add them, right? And add, so basically this function does 3 things actually. When you think about it, this set of code does 3 things. The first thing is it accepts two inputs from the user, and then the second thing is it adds those two numbers, and then the third thing is it prints out the result. So it's actually doing 3 things. So this set of code. Now, if we want to repeat this functionality for another 2 times, the most straightforward way would be just copy and paste this another 2 times. So yeah, so as you can see, the same piece of code we have just copied and pasted another 2 times, right? um Yeah, we're just like directly violating the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself, DRY principle, in software engineering. But just for making a point, I'm doing this, right? So here, to have this functionality of getting two inputs from the user and adding it and showing the result. Yeah, so we are basically copying and pasting it another two times here, right? So let's just run this, and we would get the result that we are expecting. Oh yeah, yeah, and we wouldn't have to change the variable name, right? So that's another thing that we would have to deal with. So yeah, maybe let's just or yeah, we can just initialize it. We don't need to create these variables once again. We just initialize them to 0 the second time and the third time. So yeah, so let's just do that. So let's just, since we have already created them, we don't need to recreate them, right? So yeah, let's just run this now. And yeah, as expected. So let's just, the first time around we'll just say 10 and 10, so it is 20. The second time, 20 plus 20, 40, and the third time would be 30 plus 30, 60. Yeah, cool. So it's doing it 3 times. But in order to achieve this, we had to do a bit of dirty coding, right? So we had to copy this set of instructions 3 times, literally 3 different times. And this is really bad, right? Like, it's violating the DRY, that don't repeat yourself principle. Because like, when you have code that is repeated, to do the exact same thing, later on, when there is a requirement to, let's say, change, like, the statement, this print statement that you're showing to the user, instead of saying enter first number, let's say you want to say kindly enter, you know let's say, maybe you want your application to be a bit more polite. Like, if you want to say kindly enter first number, right? Like, if you want to say that, what you would have to do is, like, you would have to add this, the word kindly, in all the other two occurrences as well, right? Like, not just first time, because it's literally the same code you have copy and pasted in several other places, right? So if you run this now, like, so your application is going to be only kind for the first first time around, and the other two times is just going to be you know um not kind. Like, so see, second time it's going to just say enter first number. So these kind of human errors can start popping up, especially when you're repeating your code, the same code in multiple places, especially for the same functionality. If you're just repeating code more than once, you might say that, like, maybe what if we just use a loop instead of like copying and pasting, that maybe that's better. So let's just do that, right? So let's just put this, like, I'm just remove these extra copies of the same instructions of adding two numbers. And let's just put this block of code inside of a loop, maybe a while loop. Like, for that, we'll just have a counter. We'll have a variable called counter, and we'll set it to 0. And while counter is less than 3, we'll run this block of code. So let's just say, I just put indent this, and yeah. So yeah, like, so this seems good. And we, like, yeah, let's just also increment the counter, right? So you ntr plus, yeah. So yes, so this is going to be running this set of instructions 3 times. And you have that function, you will have that functionality, and this is much better. And like, if you want to make your program polite or not, like, you can just do that only once, and it runs 3 times, right? So even if you remove this and say enter first number, right? So it's going to just be the same, because it's just one source of truth, right? It's just a single place where you have your code. So yeah, like, so first time 10 10 20, yeah, 20 20 30, and 30 30 60. Yes, cool. So this is much better than, like, this is definitely better than having your code copied and pasted 3 times. This is good, but there is a better way of doing this, right? So um and initially, like, we did say that this particular set of instructions is actually doing 3 things, right? So the first thing is, it is actually getting user inputs, right? It's like doing IO operations. It's actually getting a user input for the first two numbers. It's getting the inputs, right? So this is the first functionality. It's actually getting inputs, first number and the second number, from the user. And then it's actually doing some logic, right? It's actually adding two numbers. So it's, if you give two numbers, it's actually, like, basically adds this particular line, adds that two numbers, and stores the result of it. And then the third thing is, it's actually printing that said result. right? So what is happening over here, at least this main function, is it's actually right now being um, responsible for a lot of things. It's actually like being responsible for three different functionalities and also running those three functionalities in a loop, right? A good software engineering practice is to make your functions be responsible just one thing. Like, each function that you create, make it responsible for just one thing, right? So there's this very popular principle called single responsibility principle. It's part of this solid software engineering principles, made popular by Uncle Bob, Robert Martin. So the single responsibility principle states that to create scalable and really high quality code, scalable and modular and highly maintainable software, make each of your functions, anything that you write, right? Your class or your function or your, even your app for that matter, um, be responsible for one thing. Especially a function should just do one thing. So yeah, so basically each function should just have one responsibility. But whereas here we can see clearly that this main functionality seems to have a lot of responsibility, a lot of things in its plate. So anytime you would want to change the way you accept input from the user, you would have to come and modify this function, right? So, and anytime you want to change the way you're going to add two numbers, then again you would have to modify the same function. And if you want to print out the output, right, like if you want to change the way the output is printed out to the user, then again you would have to come and modify this function. So so basically it's better to keep these things separated so that we have clear separation of concern. And in that way, if at all you want to modify the way you receive inputs, you can just change that function alone rather than coming to this main function and changing this code, changing this main function just because you want to change one functionality of it, because this main function seems to have a lot of functionality right now. Now let's segregate these functionalities. Let's find the functionalities that are there, and we know that there are three functionalities, and put them into separate functions which will be reusable blocks of code, right? So you can use them how many ever times you want across, even across multiple projects. As a matter of fact, if you have really good functions that you have put into a package, you can actually use it in another project also, right? So that's the power. You can write it once and use it how many ever times you want. All right, so let's create those functions now. Okay, so the way we will do that is like, yeah, so first thing is we so this particular, let me just comment this out, and maybe we'll write a bit of pseudocode here. So the first step we want to do, the first thing that we want to do is we want to be able to get user input, right? So we want to get the two inputs from the user. So that's the first thing, and then first functionality that we need. And then the second thing that we require is we want to be able to do addition, right? So add the inputs, and then the third thing is we want to print it to the user, right? So this is where you start. Okay, so let's create functions for each of these things. So let's first create a function to get user inputs. We want to be able to get two numbers from the user, right? So let's just say let's have a function called get two numbers from user, right? It's very specific, right? So this function, all it does, it'll get two numbers from user, right? So that's what it does, and that's what you're going to call it, right? So yeah, so basically in order to do that, like, let's create two variables. Like, just create the variable called first number. We already had created, right? Let's just copy and paste it from here. So let's just create these, yeah, let's just initialize these three variables, as a matter of fact. Like, yeah, so we'll just have these three variables. So we have first number, second number, and result. So what we're going to do is we're going to, we want to get those two variables from the user. We want to basically get two inputs from the user, two numbers from the user, and we're going to capture it in these variables, right? Like, the first number is where we want to store the first number, and the second number variable is where we want to store the second number. So what we can do is we can just pass these variables into this function, as a reference, right? So we can pass them in. So that's the beauty of functions. So we can just say, like we can pass these arguments into this particular function. We can just say first number, right? So if you just say, if you're going to just say first number, if you just say first number, if you just give it as an argument, it's going to be a different value, right? So what you need to do is you need to send the address of the first number, and we're going to pass it as a pointer, we're going to pass the address of the variable here. Okay, so we're going to capture it as a pointer in this function. So so first number's address and the address of the second number. Okay, so we are going to send the address of the first number and the second number, and this addresses are going to be used, the address of these variables are going to be used inside of this function to store the values that we get from the user. Okay, let's implement it now. So here we'll just say we're going to create another function. So we're already in a function, as a matter of fact, this video we're talking about functions. So we've been using functions all along, right from the first session, first class. Basically the main is by itself is a function, right? So here what we're going to do is we're going to create the function name. So this is basically not going to return anything because we're going to just capture it in these variables itself. So basically a void, we need to first of, this is syntax, right? Like, so first thing is you need to mention the return type. What is the data type that is going to get returned from this function? So it's just void, and then the function name. So it's basically get two numbers from user. So and then yeah, that's the name of the function, and yeah, so it accepts these two arguments, right, as pointers. So that means we would have to it's accepting these addresses. So you can get addresses only as a pointer, right? So it's an integer pointer and integer pointer, right? So these two integer pointers are here. So first number pointer and the second number pointer. Now let's move this code, where we are printing these two messages to the user to get their inputs, right? So enter first number, we're saying, asking the user to enter the first number, and the first number that they enter, we want to store it inside of this pointer. So basically we'll just say, we'll just dereference this particular pointer to get the variable, the first number variable, and we'll store it there. Okay, and then the same thing we're going to do here. We're going to dereference the second number pointer to get that particular variable, that's where we are going to store this second number that we are receiving from the user, right? So that's it. So basically once we do this, over here, basically we can even test this out. So we'll just put a cout. Let's just print it out and see, if you're able to actually, you make use of this function. See, you just, moved all that code, all these instructions into a separate function. So anytime you want to get two numbers from user, you can use a function, right? You just need to pass into variable addresses, and it'll just store the first number and second number into those given addresses and return it back to you. So let's see if this works. Okay, so we'll just run this code, and so it goes into the function and into the main function. So that's where it starts, and it has these variables and all, and then it calls this is how you call a function. Okay, so this is the syntax of creating. Basically this is the syntax, main signature of creating a function: the return type, the function name, and then you get your arguments and all, and and this is how you call that function. So you're calling the function on line number 23. So it just it just creates that stack frame. So it just goes over here to line number 3 and 5, 6. So it's it's running this code. So that's the reason over here you can see that enter first number, which is inside of the get to number from user function, is getting shown here for us. So here it's asking us to enter the first number. We'll just say 10, and the second number will say 20, and yes, cool. So we gave these inputs 10 and 20 inside of this particular function. So this is a different function, right? So in this function is where we enter the first number and the second number, and since we stored that first number and the second number in these pointer variables, which is basically storing the address of the first number and the second number, that is in the main function. When we came out of the function, so in line number 25, we are no longer inside of the function. Again, we have come back to the main function. Even here in the main function, we are able to print the first number that was entered by the user inside of this function, and we are able to print the second number which was actually captured from the user inside of this get two numbers from user function. So that's pretty cool, right? Yeah, so we have now created this first function which get two numbers from the user. Perfect. Now let's create the second function. So this is done, right? So this is basically done. And the second thing is we want to add those two inputs. So we want a function that basically does addition for us, right? So if you give two numbers, it'll just add those two numbers and return it back to you. So let's just create that function. So basically the second function that we want, so yeah, we can even clear these print statements now. So the second function is we want to have a function that add two numbers. Again, we are being very specific, okay? So because this function just does one thing, it just adds two numbers, right? So add two numbers. So basically it'll need again a first number and a second number. So this particular function, what we are doing is we are not passing them as an address, okay? We're not passing the address of those variables. We're just passing, you know, the values, okay? We are passing here these arguments we are passing to this function by values, whereas here we pass them as an address, right? So because we were capturing these addresses as a pointer here in this function. So this add two numbers, what it'll do, we'll just take two inputs, the first number and the second number. It'll do the addition. We don't know how it's going to do that addition and all. We just, you know, so this function is going to take care of, you know, the responsibility of adding those two numbers, you know, lies with this function. Okay, so that function is going to take care of that. It's like we're delegating that responsibility to this particular function called add two numbers. So that's what's going to do the addition. You know, like so in the main function, all we're doing is we just need to give the two numbers that we want this add two numbers function to add, right? So after it does this addition, we want this function to return something. So in the previous function that we created, get two numbers from user, so that did not return anything, right? It just returns void. It just didn't return anything because here we were just like literally changing directly, you know, we were changing this variable itself over inside of this function because we, you know, send the address itself, right? Whereas here, this particular function, we are sending the arguments as a value, right? So those two values, the value of the first number and the second number, are going to get added in this function, and we want that to get returned back to us as an integer, right? So what we'll do is, you know, like we already have a variable called result, so we'll just use that here to capture the result that we're going to get. So basically, this add two numbers, we are expecting this function to return an integer back to us, okay? So let's just create this function now. So this is how it's going to get called, but now we don't yet have a function, right? So let's just create it over here. So we'll just create a function which returns an integer. So you mention the return type first, and then you have the function number, and then, you know, like you need to mention the data type of this variable and this variable, right? Okay, so the first number is going to be an integer, and second number again is going to be an integer variable. So you need to remove the semicolon now, and then yeah, and you have your curly brackets, right? So this function, what it's going to do is it's going to return the addition of first number and the second number, right? So that's it. So this is all it does, right? So yeah, so this is the actual logic, right? The logic that you're going to use is arithmetic logic, which basically you know, adds the first two numbers and returns it back. So this is another important keyword. So this is how you return values back, you know, this is how you return values out of a particular function. As a matter of fact, the main function also, right, we've been using this all along. You know, like main also has a return type which is an int, right? So at the end of the main function itself, there'll be a return 0, right? You'll always return 0. So in C++, C++ and all, when you return 0, that means the program ran successfully. So any other number, like maybe -1 or, you know, like some other number, you can actually assign some, you know, meaning to it, like some kind of error or something, like, you know, that's when you actually return something that other than 0. Usually when a function returns 0 in the C++ world, that means it's good, that, you know, like application ran successfully. So anyway, so here you know, like so we added those two numbers and we are returning it back. So here it should actually return back the result to us, right? So let's just print out the result again and, you know, see if that is the case. Okay, this is you know, we're doing something similar. So they have this programming methodology called test driven development. Okay, so this is not like pure test driven development, but we are testing each line as we go, right? So so that's a good thing, you know. So test your code as frequently as you can. So that's always a good practice. Anyway, so maybe in a later session we'll talk about test driven development and all, but like, yeah, so coming back to this, so yeah, here you have C out. We're just going to say result and std and l. We're just going to print it out because we're gonna have a more sophisticated, we're gonna have a better way of printing the result. For now, we'll just, yeah, print it out. Cool. So let's just print it out and let's see if we are actually getting the sum of two numbers, right? So from this function, so let's just run this. Yeah, so here again, it's so it came to the main function and it called this first function get now two numbers from the user. So it went here, and that's why we are this is what's happening. So this we are inside of this particular function, get two numbers from user. So we'll just give the two numbers 10 and 20. Cool. Yes, see what happened after it got those two numbers. So those two numbers have been now stored in the first number and the second number variable, and those two numbers we are passing them as values into another function called add two numbers, right? So this add two numbers is this is a function, and here you got those two numbers and you added those two numbers and you gave that result back. So the logic for adding those two numbers is in a separate function, right? So you got that result, and that result you're just printing it out to the terminal. So that's what happened over here. Cool, perfect. So the second function is also done, right? So that's awesome. So this is also done. Now the last thing is we want to print the result to the user. So we can actually use cout itself, yeah, that works, but let's have a print function, so because we want to have this nice string saying the answer is, or the addition of two numbers is, or right. So if you want to have some kind of a nice string stating what you have done, you can have that, and you can have a special print function rather than using the standard cout. So let's just have another function which basically prints the result. So print result, so we just call it print result, right? So this will just say and obviously you need to pass in the result, right? So we'll just say result, right? So this will take the result integer and print it on the terminal saying the result is this. So let's just go here and create another function here. So this again is not going to return anything because this is a function that we are just want to that we're using just to print something to the terminal, right? So we don't necessarily want anything to be returned from it. So we can just say the return type is void and print call it print result, right? So print result, just put it here, and it accepts an integer which is the result, right? So and we'll just say std cout. We're just going to use cout in this instance. Std cout the, and we'll say the result is, and then we'll say we'll use the value, right? So here again we are passing the result as value. Okay, we're not doing it by as a pointer or any other method. And then we'll have a std endl. Yeah, that's it. Cool. So this is just going to print the result for us. So we just need to call that. Yeah, let's be calling it, right? So in these three lines itself, right? So this is very powerful, right? Because what you were doing with all these, all the lines which were together, right? Now we have just, made it very modular, right? So it's very modular now, and this is very powerful because even if you want to do it three times, yes, obviously you need to use a loop, and it's better to use a loop. Yeah, so let's just have it here. So now inside the loop you only have these three functionalities, right? So um let's remove all these other things. Yeah, so it's very clean, right? Like even from a readability standpoint and from a code maintenance standpoint, you exactly know what's going on just by looking at it, right? Looking at the code. So you can see that okay, we need another variable called counter, right? So we just create that as well. So counter 0. Yeah, so basically just by looking at the code you get to see what's going on. So you can see that there are these variables that we're using, first number, second number, result, and counter. Cool. And then there's a counter which is until it's less than 3 it's going to run these functions. So the first function is to get two numbers from the user. Cool. It's going to store that. We can see that we have passed it by address, right? So that means we're going to change the value in place. So first number and second number values are going to be, that's what we are going to use to capture the inputs from the user. And then we are adding those two numbers, we are passing those two numbers in, and we got the result, and we're just printing it out using this print result function. So that's perfect. And we are doing this three times, right? So that's why we're having a counter here. So let's just run this now, and you would see that we got the same result that we initially got by having everything together in a single place. But now the code is much more modular. Okay, from the functionality standpoint it's still the same, but the source code, right? So the source code is really clean. You have all these separation of concerns, and each function is just being responsible for doing just one thing. So that's really cool. So here you can just say 10 and 10, you got the answer 20, and then 20, 20, 40, and then you have 30, 30, 60. Perfect. Your application is enabling you to add 3 times. Okay? So this is pretty cool. And now the beauty of this is, now since you have this nice design in place, right? Let me just even remove this while loop and all, and now you can reuse a lot of these components. What do I mean by that is, like, so let's say you have a requirement to now add another feature. So this is for addition, right? So this is basically for addition. So like, let's say your client, or like your users are asking for a feature to have a subtraction functionality, right? So all you would have to do is, like, now if you want to, after doing this addition, if you want subtraction, all you need to do, still for the subtraction, you would have to get those two numbers, right? So you can use the same function to get those two numbers, right? And then like this result, and you would, again, after you got the result, you need to print it out. But this result part alone is what you would have to change, right? So like here in the result part, instead of saying add two numbers, you would need to have another function saying subtract two numbers, right? So this is the only function that you would have to write, right? So after that, the result is, like, pretty much, once if you are able to get a result from the subtract two numbers as an integer, you can print them out, right? You can print the result. So all you need to do in order to now add this additional functionality of subtracting two numbers is just implement this one function, which does this subtraction, right? So we just, like, quickly do that here. So we just copy this same function, like add two numbers, and we just change it to subtract two numbers. It still is going to accept to these two numbers. The only thing that changes is the operation, right? So operator, instead of using addition operator, you will just use a subtraction operator. And by doing this, subtract two numbers, like over here, if you come, that's it. You have like your application having a new functionality. And it's really, since it's really modular, like the way you're going to get those two numbers and print the results, the IO is still the same, the functionality is still the same, like you're just using this exact same code. The only thing that changed is the logic, right? The logic for doing that arithmetic, either you're doing add or you're doing subtract. So that's it. So let's just run our application now, and you will be able to see that with just that small change, we have a new functionality now. Like, so into the first number, let's just say 10 and 20. So yeah, it's adding it, and that's why we got 30. Now let's just do the subtraction, right? Let's just say 100, and we'll just say 10. See, and 100 minus 10 is 90, right? So it did the subtraction also for us. So that's pretty cool. Similarly, you can keep extending the functionality of this application to do multiplication, division, and whatever you want, just by adding that respect to functionality alone. This, you just need to create that respect to functionality. If you want to do multiplication, you just need to it's so simple. You just to create another function basically called multiply two numbers, and just change this operator to multiply, right? That's it. It's easy as that. And here you just need to do your multiplication, right? So you're just reusing code. So that's the beauty of this multiply. So here, instead of subtract two numbers, just do multiply two numbers. That's it. Your code, you added a completely a new feature to your application, just like that. And we can just even run this application quickly and see. So that's the beauty of keeping your code really modular, and leveraging functions to help you keep it modular. And always, right, like as much as possible, always try to keep your functions just be responsible for one thing, just that single responsibility principle. So yeah, so first is addition, right? So 10 and 20 is 30, perfect. 100 minus 90 is 10, perfect. And now you're doing multiplication, right? So let's just do 5 into 20 is 100, perfect. So it's doing that as well. So that's what functions enable you to do. It enables you to make your application really modular, and and enables you to reuse code. See, yeah, we have reused the code for getting two numbers from the user in 3 places. We didn't have to write it again and again. We just are using this code 3 times, like just by calling that function. And also the printing the code to print the function, we are able to leverage it again and again. So that's the beauty of functions. That's the like awesome power that functions gives us. It enables us to create these like blocks of code that can be reused in your application. And even if in other projects that you work on, if you want to get two numbers from the user, you already have written it here, right? So you can use that. So you don't have to write redundant code. You don't need to write code that you have already written. You can, like, just keep on leveraging things if you write code in a modular and a functional manner like this. So yeah, so this was about functions in C++. I hope this video was useful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in another video. Cheers.